Last time on time travel. Sam was about to marry Emma in New York. The celebration was perfect. The future looked bright. Until a strange accident changed everything. A blow to the head under the chandelier sent Sam spinning out of his world. When he opened his eyes, the city was gone, the wedding vanished. He found himself in the Arabian desert, dressed as another man, surrounded by strangers. A name echoed in his mind case. The legend had begun.
They say death is the end, but for Sam, it never is.
When the blade pierced his chest in the desert, when the sand turned red beneath him, he thought it was over. But once again, darkness was not final. Once again, another world was waiting. This time, he awoke to the sound of waves. The scent of salt filled his lungs. Sam gasped and sat up, his body heavy, the ground beneath him marble, not sand. He looked around and his heart raced. Towering columns surrounded him, carved with images of gods and kings. Beyond them stretched the sea, endless and glittering beneath the sun. Ships with painted sails floated in the harbor. Soldiers marched with spears. Servants hurried with baskets of fruit. Sam stumbled to his feet. But he wasn't Sam anymore. His reflection in the polished bronze shield of a passing soldier told him the truth. A hardened face, strong jaw, hair cut in the style of Rome. A breastplate of steel, a red cloak trailing behind him. He was Mark Antony, Roman general. Panic struck him. He spun in circles, whispering, "Emma, Emma, where are you?" His voice broke against the stone. No answer came. People walked past, bowing their heads to him as if he were a man of power, yet inside he was lost, alone. He wandered through the palace, his footsteps echoing down corridors lit with torches. Every servant he stopped only bowed, waiting for orders, not understanding the desperation in his eyes. "The Queen," he muttered. "Where is the Queen?" He didn't even know if she would be here, but his soul knew. She was always here. Somewhere. In every age. In every story. At last, he reached a great hall. Its floor polished like glass, its walls painted with gold and lapis. Musicians plucked strings, and the air smelled of wine and incense. At the far end, hidden in shadows, voices murmured. Sam's heart pounded. Slowly, the crowd parted. And then he saw her. Emma, but not Emma. Draped in silk, crowned with jewels, eyes dark and endless. Cleopatra. The sight of her crushed the air from his chest. She stood with the grace of a queen, yet when her eyes lifted to meet his, time itself stopped. She looked at him with curiosity, suspicion, and something else. Something eternal. Sam's lips trembled. "Emma," he whispered under his breath, but the name was swallowed by the sound of music. He took a step closer, his hands shaking. Cleopatra tilted her head, studying him. "Marcus Antonius," she said in a voice smooth as honey, yet sharp as a blade. "You seek me as though you have been lost." Sam froze. His throat tightened. Lost, that was exactly what he was. Across deserts, across centuries, across lives, always searching. And now, here she was again. He wanted to run to her, to take her hand, to shout her true name, but the weight of history pressed on him. He could only bow, hiding the storm in his heart. "Cleopatra," he said, forcing the Roman name through his lips. "I have found you." The first days were filled with silence. Cleopatra watched him carefully, as if weighing the soul behind the Roman armor. Sam followed her through the palace, through halls of marble and gardens of jasmine. He played the role expected of Mark Antony, but inside he was still searching. Searching for Emma in the queen's face. And every time she looked at him, he felt it, she was there. Different name, different crown, but the same soul. She tested him with questions, sharp and dangerous. "Why do you look at me as though you have known me before? Why does a Roman general tremble when I speak?" Sam wanted to tell her everything, that he had loved her across centuries, that every life brought him back to her, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he answered with honesty hidden in poetry. "Because some faces," he said, "are carved into eternity. And yours is one of them." Her lips curved into a smile that was not just amused, but intrigued. For the first time she let him sit close beside her. And soon they were inseparable.
Nights in Alexandria were unlike any Sam had known.
The city glittered with torches, music spilling from courtyards, dancers moving like flames.
Cleopatra and Antony threw feasts that shook the empire tables heavy with food, fountains spilling with wine, poets reciting verses of desire.
And at the center of it all sat Sam and Emma, reborn as Antony and Cleopatra,
their hands never far from each other's, their eyes never leaving. The people whispered, Rome trembled,
but they did not care.
Love burned too brightly.
On the Nile, they sailed together in golden ships, their sails painted with purple and silver.
Sam stood at her side as the river stretched like a mirror beneath the moon. Emma leaned into him, her voice soft.
Do you ever fear the future? Sam closed his eyes. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her the truth. That he knew how their story ended. That fate had always been cruel. But instead he pressed her hand. Not tonight. Not with you. She smiled. But there was sadness in her gaze, as though some part of her already knew too.
But the future could not be ignored forever.
Messengers arrived from Rome, their words heavy with threat. Octavian, the rising power, called Antony a traitor, a man bewitched by the Queen of Egypt. Soldiers whispered of war. The senators demanded Antony return. Cleopatra listened to the reports with cold eyes, but Sam saw the fear behind them. They will come for us, she said one night, her voice breaking. Rome will never allow this love. Sam's chest tightened. He held her face in his hands.
Then let them come, he whispered. I have crossed death itself to find you.
I will not lose you to politics. But in his heart, he felt the pull of destiny again. No matter how tightly he held her, history was a chain too heavy to break. And yet, even as war loomed, their love grew fiercer. Perhaps because they knew the end was near.
Every embrace, every kiss, every moment by torchlight was lived as though it were the last.
They loved as if love alone could fight back an empire.
But empires are not so easily defeated.
The drums of war shook the earth.
The harbor of Actium was a storm of sails and steel.
Octavian's fleet stretched across the horizon, a wall of death closing in. Sam stood at the bow of his ship, armor heavy on his shoulders, sword tight in his grip. The wind stung his face, but all he could think of was Emma Cleopatra. She stood on her own vessel, her eyes locked on his. Even across the chaos, he felt her gaze. She was afraid, but she was still his anchor. The battle began with fire. Arrows streaked across the sky, ships collided, men screamed as iron clashed on iron. The sea turned red. Sam fought like a man possessed, driving his blade into any who stood in his way. He no longer cared for Rome or Egypt.
He fought only for her. But fate was not merciful.
Octavian's fleet pressed harder, his men overwhelming. One by one, Antony's ships were crushed or burned. Sam felt the tide turning. His soldiers fell around him, their cries piercing the roar of battle. He staggered, blood running down his arm, his breath heavy. Through the smoke, he saw Emma's ship retreating.
Not by cowardice, but by necessity, her guards pulling her away, shouting that the queen must live. Sam's heart broke.
He shouted her name across the water, though no one else could hear it.
Emma!
A spear struck his side, and the force drove him to his knees. Pain exploded, but he refused to fall. He pulled the weapon free and kept fighting, his strength fading but his will unbroken. At last he was struck down. His sword slipped from his hand, his body collapsing onto the deck. The world spun, the sky above him a blur of fire and smoke. They carried him to Cleopatra's quarters, broken and bleeding. When she saw him, she ran to his side, falling to her knees. Her hands cupped his face, trembling.
No,
she whispered, her voice breaking. Not you. Not now. Sam's breath came shallow, each word a struggle.
I found you.
Even here, even in this life. I'll always find you. Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling onto his armor. Don't leave me, Marcus. Please, stay. He smiled faintly, his eyes dimming but still fixed on hers. "I'll see you again. In another time. In another life." And then his chest rose one last time. And fell. Silence. Cleopatra clutched him, pressing her forehead to his, sobbing into the stillness. The Queen of Egypt, the most powerful woman in the world, wept like a broken lover. She kissed his lips, already growing cold, and whispered, "Come back to me, wherever you are." Outside, the empire roared in victory. Inside, the world ended for her. And somewhere beyond death, Sam was already being pulled away, his soul torn from Rome and Egypt, searching for Emma once more.